We don't care about you. I just want to say that one more time. I want to make this point to everybody listening. The United States of America doesn't care about you. We don't care about anybody. If the United States were to work with Lebanon to build an army capable of fighting Hezbollah, there would be a civil war. All right, because Hezbollah is not going away. And it's no longer good business to show dead Palestinian children. I mean, my God, just yesterday, Israel bombed Gaza and killed 2 little boys whose only crime was they were going out for firewood. Israel's not serious about peace. Israel's serious about one thing and one thing only: domination. I cut my teeth in the intelligence business back during the Cold War, where I spent my time singularly focused on fighting the Soviet army. And they accused me of being a Russian agent, and they sent 40 FBI agents into my house, seizing electronics and threatening to charge me with crimes that, if I was found guilty of these crimes, would put me in jail for 5 to 20 years. It's not a trivial thing that was happening. So I will be in Russia on the 1 year to the day that the FBI said your work with Russia is a crime.
Tonight, I'm happy to welcome back Scott Ritter, a former Marine intelligence officer and UN weapons inspector who famously warned the world that the WMD case for the Iraq war was a lie long before Washington admitted it, and one of the most unflinching voices challenging America's military and foreign policy orthodoxy. And just like we do every time, we're going to dive into what Western media won't. So let's get into it. Scott, a very warm welcome back from me and everyone here, all the crew. They've missed you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back.
So, Scott, something very big just happened in the Eastern Mediterranean a week ago, and almost nobody in the U.S. media is talking about it. After an 18-year deadlock, Lebanon and Cyprus, both my homelands, have finally signed a full maritime demarcation agreement, ending a stalemate that began with a 2007 draft deal that Lebanon never ratified because of domestic crises and internal pressures, particularly from Hezbollah, which repeatedly blocked its finalization. So this breakthrough comes only 2 years after Lebanon concluded its US brokered maritime arrangement with Israel, a highly unusual deal where the two sides never actually signed the same document. Instead, they sent separate letters to the US, which then submitted them to the UN. And Lebanon insisting that this did not constitute any form of normalization of ties with Israel at the time. So to our matter at hand, today, Beirut has now settled its sea borders with both Cyprus and Israel, but not Syria. Scott, what does this actually signal? Is Lebanon entering, whether willing, is it entering a Western-aligned energy architecture in the Mediterranean? And what does this mean for the US, Israel's northern front, and Europe's search for non-Russian gas at a moment of global instability?
Well, I mean, let's just talk the big picture here. Delineating Lebanon's maritime border was a major sticking point. And as you rightfully pointed out, Hezbollah had indicated that if the border was drawn in a certain way, that it was the equivalent of giving up Lebanese territory to Israel. And Hezbollah is a resistance organization resisting Israeli occupation. But the maritime border isn't just about controlling salt water. It's about controlling what's underneath the salt water. And there's a tremendous amount of potential for economic gain that can't be had as long as that border is in dispute. Neither Israel nor Lebanon can successfully exploit the resources below that border. And so by getting Hezbollah to agree to this, or at least not to stop this, this is a huge step forward for Lebanon because, I mean, let's just be honest, Lebanon's economy is an absolute basket case. It's a disaster. And I don't know if there's any magical solution that can come from any single source. What I do know, though, is that the economic potential that accrues from being able to successfully and sustainably exploit energy resources that are in Lebanese territorial waters provides the potential for income generation that can only be seen as beneficial for Lebanon. The other thing does is it creates a semblance of stability, of normalcy. Again, I'm not saying that Hezbollah is out of the picture. I'm not saying that Lebanon and Israel have resolved their many, many problems. You only have to see the drones flying over southern Lebanon today to understand that there is significant angst. And Israel continues to carry out airstrikes against Hezbollah targets. So, peace has now broken out all over. But what we're seeing here is an indication of the strategic direction that Lebanon and Israel want to take. The normalization of borders is the first step towards the normalization of relations.
Right. And where does also the agreement, the ratification of also the maritime borders with Cyprus mean when it comes to Europe's search for the non-Russian gas at this moment of global instability?
Well, I don't want to read too much into this. Again, anytime you have normalization of borders, but there's another problem here in Cyprus. It's northern Cyprus and the Turks. I don't think the Turks have gone away from this picture. I think the Turks continue to lay claim to the energy resources in and around Cyprus. And so as long as you have Cyprus, divided the way it is, as long as Turkey continues to push for the independence of northern Cyprus, it doesn't matter what Lebanon and Cyprus do in terms of borders. There still is inherent instability there that's going to interfere with, what I know about energy, about pulling energy out of the earth, is that the companies that do it, whether they're national oil companies or they're private companies, they spend a whole bunch of money investing into this. We're talking tens of billions, sometimes more dollars. And they do it on the belief that there's going to be a period of time, 30, 40, 50 or more years, where they're going to be able to sustainably and reliably withdraw resources from this investment. They are not going to invest this kind of infrastructure and resources up front, only to see that a war breaks out 5 years from now and destroys their entire investment. So I think before people are going to sink the money that's necessary into, it's one thing to do the reconnaissance, to go out and do the exploration. But then once you find something, you prove reserves are there, getting that out of the ground, you're going to need geopolitical stability. And right now, the waters around Cyprus, even with this deal with Lebanon, these aren't geopolitically stable waters.
Well, I mean, for our viewers, the Republic of Cyprus is the island's internationally recognized state and acted fully within its legal rights under international law and UNCLOS when signing the EEZ with Lebanon. Israel's increased presence and involvement in the island might lead to a safeguarding of these resources. Let's not forget that with Cyprus and Greece, they are acting together and in cohesion. And one of these measures is the project of the East Med pipeline. So Israel has a lot to lose also from this. But let's move on, because I wanted our focus today to be on Lebanon. So, Scott, I've been wanting to ask you for a while about your take on the current U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Special Envoy for Syria, Tom Barak. And I want to bring out the question in this form. He published a long post on his X account back in October, right after Trump had secured the so-called Gaza peace plan. And he called for Syria and Lebanon that they are the next pieces of the Levant peace, urging Beirut to disarm Hezbollah or face Israeli action. And many Lebanese are warning that Barak's rhetoric could ignite a new civil war and further weaken the country's fragile institutions. They're saying that Washington should stop lecturing from afar and actually equip the Lebanese armed forces if disarmament is a real goal, though everyone knows that Israel will never tolerate a strong Lebanese army on its northern border. So, Scott, what in your view does Barak's decision to flag Lebanon as next mean? Can you help decode what Washington is signaling here for our Western audience?
Well, first of all, Tom Barak is a businessman. He's not a diplomat. He's a businessman. He has some historic and cultural ties to the region. He's really, his job is, I think, ambassador to Turkey. And never forget that the job that the United States Senate ratified him for is the United States ambassador to Turkey. Just to get back to what you said about Cyprus, look, I'm not here to denigrate Cyprus's sovereignty. I'm not here to cast dispersions on any agreement signed by Cyprus, but you can't ignore the reality that a significant part of Cyprus is occupied by Turkey, and that Turkey isn't going away anytime soon. Erdogan is the new sultan, and he has a vision for how Turkey is going to operate in the region. That's been very aggressive in Armenia, against Armenia, aggressive in support of Azerbaijan, aggressive in Syria, to include the potential of, people are talking about the possibility of a war between Turkey and Israel. And so this is, Tom Barak's principal focus. Now he's become a special envoy for a number of things: Lebanon, Syria, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. I mean, the man is everywhere. He's basically dealing with the periphery of Turkey. He's not doing it for the benefit of Turkey. He's doing it for the benefit of the United States, and more specifically for the benefit of Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump has this vision of being a peacemaker. And if, again, not to be too critical, because there's nothing wrong with making peace. I'm a big fan of peace breaking out all over. But what are the motives here? You can break up a fight in a schoolyard, and separate the students and declare that the issue's over, only to find out that they're going to fight again tomorrow because you haven't solved the fundamental problems. Here, Donald Trump wants some superficial, immediate cessation of hostilities that looks good, on the headlines of a newspaper, and he's tasked, Thomas Barak to accomplish this. But is Barak necessarily the man to resolve the fundamental problems? And your question answers itself. No, because his desire, his statements insult Lebanon, insult every aspect of Lebanon, and show an absolute disregard for the historical reality that Lebanon finds itself in. Let's first of all put it this way. If the United States were to work with Lebanon to build an army capable of fighting Hezbollah, there would be a civil war. All right, because Hezbollah is not going away. Been there, done that. Don't we remember the 1980s when the United States came in and put its finger on the side of the Lebanese armed forces, which were treated as just another militia by the various factions there. Today, maybe the Lebanese armed forces have a little bit more legitimacy, but they cannot defeat Hezbollah. If they got into a shooting war with Hezbollah today, they would lose. That's a 100% guarantee. One of the problems is that Hezbollah continues to be viewed by a significant percentage of the Lebanese population, especially the Shia, as a resistance organization against an Israeli aggressor that continues to illegally occupy significant swaths of Lebanese territory and who violates Lebanese sovereignty on a daily basis. Now, if the Lebanese army is this great defender of Lebanese sovereignty, where are they? Silent. The only one standing up to Israel is Hezbollah. So, this is a reality. Yes, Hezbollah has taken a black eye. The death of Hassan Nasrallah was a huge blow. The pager terrorist act, because it was a terrorist act, did severely harm middle management of Hezbollah. But the Hezbollah movement, the resistance movement of Hezbollah, is very much viable today, resonates in the population of much of Lebanon, especially the southern parts. And the other thing is, Hezbollah has shown itself to be a responsible member of the Lebanese government. I mean, we can sit here and pick the Lebanese government apart 6 ways from Sunday. Corruption, favoritism, sectarianism. It's not an ideal situation. But Hezbollah has become a functioning part of this government. And I think Hezbollah deserves some kudos for subordinating its resistance mission in the larger interests of Lebanon. And we see this with the border deal that you just spoke of. In the past, Hezbollah would never have allowed this deal to take place. But Hezbollah has allowed it because Hezbollah is now a member of government and functions as a member of government. And this is the other thing. When you talk about building up the Lebanese army to take on Hezbollah, it's not the army versus a resistance movie. It's the army versus government, a member of government. Barack doesn't understand this, doesn't respect this, and his language actually creates more problems than it solves. It didn't solve anything, and it just created a whole host of issues. This is a very sensitive issue for Lebanon, for Hezbollah, for the region. And there's larger issues at stake here. Do we just want to pretend that Iran doesn't exist? Do we want to pretend that there is no, legacy involvement of Iran in Lebanon, that Hezbollah has suddenly forgotten it's the decades of close relationships with the Iranians? Do we want to forget that right next door in Syria, there's a nightmare taking place where Al-Qaeda has taken the reins of government? It doesn't matter how many photo opportunities the president of Syria has with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. He's still an Al-Qaeda terrorist with blood on his hands, who's radical Islamist jihadists are slaughtering Alawites and Christians as we speak. This is a reality. So, to pretend that you can treat Lebanon in a vacuum and to dictate outcomes to Lebanon, that have no respect for the domestic political reality of Lebanon or the region that Lebanon operates in, is sort of the height of hubris and ignorance. And I think that's the best way to describe Tom Barack. The height of hubris and ignorance.
Oh, Scott, spot on as always. So after you just outlined in this most eloquent manner how Barack is flagging Lebanon as next, I wanted to mention a glaring contradiction which you happen to just also touch upon. The so-called 2024 ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon is being violated almost daily, with hundreds of projectiles fired and airstrikes launched against Lebanon since November 24, killing over 270 people, mostly civilians, according to the Associated Press. So, meanwhile, all the talk also of the recent Gaza peace plan by Washington and its backers, Israel has also launched hundreds of attacks on Gaza, breaking the peace deal, resulting in a new wave of hundreds of civilian deaths over the past 6 weeks. Scott, why is Western and especially American public opinion being sold a narrative of peace and stability when the reality on the ground is relentless violence ensuing?
I told you before the show started, if you ask me a question, you're going to get an answer. I'm going to try and be careful right now because I don't want to insult anybody. You know me. I have the deepest respect for everybody in the world. I view everybody as a human being. I especially have a warm spot for people who are oppressed and who are subjected to tyranny from foreign powers. And so my heart reaches out to the people of Lebanon, to the people of Beirut. I have friends that live in Beirut. I remember during the bombing of Beirut, I would contact them on Telegram and WhatsApp. There were days where they couldn't respond because they had no power, they had no means, and I didn't know if they were alive or dead. And these are people that I've met. I know, the mother, the father. I know their daughters. These are great people, and you just have to sit there at night and say, "Are my friends dead?" And then, fortunately, the next day they make contact with you. So, but I remember, just we would text. So you can't hear the voice, but you can read between the lines of the text, the absolute fear that they live in. And I've also spent a lot of time talking with Palestinians, with people who have been to Gaza, lived in Gaza, who support what's going on in Gaza. And my heart just reaches out. You know me, if I mention Hind Rajab's name, my eyes tear up. Yes. So I'm all about the legitimacy of the cause of these people. Israel should be condemned vehemently for the crimes, the ongoing crimes that they are committing against the people of Lebanon and the people of Gaza on a daily basis, and the people of Syria, by the way. Israel is bombing Syria as we speak. Israel is a criminal entity in my mind, an illegitimate nation carrying out illegitimate acts of war in support of an illegitimate cause, which is Zionism. Having said that, no one in America gives a rat's you-know-what about the people of Lebanon. We don't care. We never did, never have, never will. And the same thing about Gaza. I mean, there's some people out there that fly the Palestinian flag and do this, but, what's happened here is that by proclaiming that peace is broken out all over, and by being able to show what I call, it's not superficial, but sort of a sideshow. Look, we signed a demarcation of the border, the maritime border between Lebanon and Israel. Peace is breaking out all over. It's wonderful. Ring the bells. It's great. Look, we've sent another delegation to Israel where they're talking about the future of Gaza and the potential. And we're talking to Arab. The Abrams Accords is breaking out all over. I mean, we got, Kazakhstan to sign on to the Abrams Accord. Look how successful this is. And people go, wow, then I don't have to dig any deeper. And it's no longer good business to show dead Palestinian children. I mean, my God, just yesterday, Israel bombed Gaza and killed 2 little boys whose only crime was they were going out for firewood.
Yes.
In the past, we would have put their torn bodies on every internet channel, every TV channel. People would be crying and sobbing and screaming. Now it's just ignored. They're just one of hundreds of innocent civilians slaughtered by the Israelis, every week. And we say nothing because we want to believe that peace is breaking out. This shows you how superficial much of the anti-war movement truly is. When it's politically convenient for them, when they pay no or not a meaningful political price, they're out there screaming and shouting at the top of their lungs. But they don't sustain this movement, and the basis of their involvement is superficial, emotional. And look what's happened now. We want to pretend that peace is breaking out. We want to pretend that there's a viable Gaza peace plan. We want to pretend that Israel is serious about peace with Lebanon. Well, ask the Lebanese. Is Israel serious about peace? I mean, how serious can you be when they bomb you every day, when they shell you every day, when they violate your sovereignty every day? Israel's not serious about peace. Israel's serious about one thing and one thing only, domination. And yet in the United States, we've decided to redefine domination as a sincere desire for peace. And of course, Donald Trump is the ultimate peacemaker, and he can't win the Nobel Peace Prize next year if he doesn't have peace breaking out everywhere, including Gaza and Lebanon. And so the United States government will continue to promulgate the nonsense that they are pursuing a peaceful outcome in the region when the exact opposite has happened. We don't care about you. I just want to say that one more time. I want to make this point to everybody listening. The United States of America doesn't care about you.
No,
we don't care about Lebanon. We don't care about Cyprus. We don't care about anybody.
We know that, Scott. We're just hoping that maybe through podcasts like these, and having guests like you who are recognized with the American public, that maybe they'll start to care. We know that.
Who knows what the future will hold? Again,
hope
I will say this,
Scott. When you're dealing
and I'll
with
say this in defense of the American people.
They never lose hope.
We're good people. The American people are good people.
Yes, of course.
If you live in America and you need us, we will take the shirt off our back for you. If we see you on the street, we will help you. We'll put out the helping hand. But we are ignorant of the world we live in. We don't know anything about the world we live in.
You know what? It's better for peace of mind, if you ask me.
Yeah. Pardon?
It's better for peace of mind, if you ask me.
Well, it helps us sleep easier at night. Yeah. I mean, my good, it's Christmas time. We got Christmas music on the radio. We got the lights going up. We got Santa Claus coming to the mall. Life is good. We don't want to worry about dead Palestinian children or dead Lebanese children or blown up families. No, we want to believe that peace, goodwill, and friendship among men is thriving in the world today. And we get away with it because you're not next door to us. We can tune you out. And unfortunately, that's what we're doing. We're tuning you out.
Scott, let's move down to my other the other matter I wanted us to discuss. So for years, anyone who warned about the long-term ambitions of a greater Israel agenda was always branded anti-Semitic, even though the term Semite itself has been hijacked and narrowed by Zionist discourse to mean only Jews, when in reality it refers to the people of this region who share Semitic languages. Lebanese are Semites, Palestinians, Syrians, Assyrians, and others. Let's get this straight. Inside Israel, the greater Israel vision is spoken of openly, yet Western audiences are constantly told that such an agenda doesn't exist. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said on camera and in Hebrew that achieving the greater Israel vision is his life's purpose. However, Israel cannot freely pursue that agenda without first neutralizing Iran. You happen to have briefly mentioned it earlier, and I want your take on this. Iran is the only regional power capable of imposing real deterrence to their vision. Since Trump's Gaza peace plan was secured, many analysts expected that it was going to give Israel the breathing space to move against Iran, potentially drawing in the US again. However, everything has remained strangely quiet on that front, on the Iran front, Scott. What do you think is happening? Is happening beneath this suspicious silence?
There's many aspects to this issue. Just a second, I got to lubricate my throat before I cough. Yes, I am addicted to Diet Coke, just so your audience, when they say, stop drinking that. Sorry. It's what I do. But there's a couple things. One, first of all, you're correct to point out that Iran is perhaps the largest impediment to Israel achieving its greater Israel goal. But so too is Turkey. We can't ignore the fact that Turkey is emerging as a significant impediment to Israel's visions, because it clashes with Turkey's pan-Ottoman, the new Ottoman Empire that Turkey's trying to pursue. Iran has proven that it has the ability to do significant harm to Israel. And Israel knows this, and Israel knows that there's nothing Israel could do to prevent this significant harm from occurring. And the United States knows that there's nothing they can do to help Israel prevent this. So any future conflict between Israel and Iran will result in the strategic devastation of Israel's economy. It doesn't matter what harm Israel does to Iran. And let's just assume that Israel can do significant harm to Iran. It doesn't matter. Israel will be suffered a near fatal blow that they won't be able to recover from. And as long as that is the reality, there's nothing that can be done. The United States also doesn't want to be involved in a major conflict that drags on for decades with Iran. I just want to remind people Iran is a very, very big nation with a significant population, and it's not going to be defeated overnight. And any hope that there's going to be internal forces that can be mobilized in support of the Israeli-American agenda, I think was squashed after the 12-day war. I had the honor and privilege of attending a meeting with the Iranian president in September. And he provided a briefing and some insight into things. And he was very frank and very honest. And he said, look, before the 12-day war, there were problems in Iran. There was a split between the presidency and the supreme leader. And people say, well, wait a minute, you can't. Iran's a dictatorship. The supreme leader is everything. No, Iran has a constitution, and the president has a lot of power, and the parliament has significant say. And what the president was saying is there were differences of opinion on strategic issues between the various power centers in Iran that the foreign enemies of Iran sought to exploit by trying to capitalize upon ethnic tensions, to encourage the Baluch, to encourage the Azeris, to encourage the Kurds, to encourage the Arabs, to encourage different political factions within the Iranian population to go up against one another. They had tried it in the summer of 2023 after the tragic death of the of the Kurdish girl whose name I apologize, I can't remember, but she died in police custody. It led to demonstrations that turned into a nationwide revolt, not because of her, but because foreign intelligence services sought to exploit the internal divisions in Iran and bring Iran down. At that time, I had a similar privilege of meeting with President Rouhani, and he talked about that. He said that was the most dangerous period of time in the post-revolutionary history of Iran, that Iran suffered a great threat and the enemy almost succeeded, but they failed. And Iran emerged from that stronger. Now we roll into 2025, and it appears that these various intelligence services, the United States, Israel, Great Britain, the Dutch, and others, were seeking to replicate what happened in the summer of 2023 using the Israeli decapitation strike against the Iranian leadership, et cetera, as the way to come in. They failed. What President Pezeshkian said is that Iran today is of a singular mind. There is no division within Iran. Everybody is focused on Iran and what's best for Iran today. Iran is stronger internally than it has ever been since the revolution. And this is a reality. Iran is not a weak nation. Iran is a strong nation, a unified nation. And they recognize where the threat is, and they are ready to deal with this threat. But Iran is not looking for a war. The other issue that has come, when we say that Iran is unified, a lot of people immediately say that that means that the conservative wing has won, that they have prevailed. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, from a national security standpoint, Iran is very much conservative, but in a defensive mode. Iran's not looking for a war. Iran's just saying that if you bring war to us, you will pay the ultimate price. But from an economic standpoint, this is where sort of the liberal moderate wing has emerged dominant. They understand that they must find a way to peacefully coexist with everybody, even Israel. They're not going to say Israel's name, but they want better relations with the West. They want the sanctions lifted. They want Iran to be a functioning member of not just a regional economy, but a global economy, so Iran can fully exploit its energy resources to the benefit of its people. Iran is not looking for more war, more death, more destruction. Iran is looking for peace and stability, and Iran is playing a behind-the-scenes role in promoting this, promoting their better relations with Russia, with China. Just take a look at the North-South corridor that Russia and Iran are touting now, the new Silk Road coming out of China, the train connectivity taking place, the economic potential that exists with the Eurasian Economic Union that Russia is putting forward, with Iran playing a leading role in economically engaging with the Central Asian republics. There is great potential here for Iran, as long as there's peace. And so I don't think that Iran is looking for a war. Iran is actually looking for the avoidance of war. Iran played an important role in helping resolve the Yemeni conflict. Understanding that the best way to get Yemen to stop shooting ships is to create a ceasefire. But Iran doesn't trust Israel. Iran doesn't believe Israel is going to suddenly, change its colors. But Iran plays the long game, and that's the other thing people need to respect about the Iranians. They have a consistent vision of what the region should look like, and it's not a region dominated by Iran. They're not looking to create a greater Iran. They're looking to create a region where sovereignty is respected by all nations. This requires, of course, Israel to change its approach, and that's not going to happen overnight. So, but Iran is taking a longer look. I think Iran is in a stronger place against Israel if they can get sanctions lifted, if they can develop their economy. That gives Iran more tools, economic tools, political tools that can be used to shape a future in the region. But I don't think Iran, is waking up every morning saying, how can we go to war with Israel? What can we do to generate problems in Lebanon? What can we do to create more tragedy in Syria? How can we get the Houthi to do our bidding and attack Israel? I think Iran's taking the exact opposite approach. How can we generate stability in Lebanon to the benefit of the Lebanese people? How can we bring about an end to this awful tragedy that is Syria, to the benefit of the Syrian people? And what can we do in Yemen to bring a good outcome for the Yemeni people, the Houthi? Why? Because the Iranians aren't Americans. We tend in the West to mirror image ourselves onto other nations. So when we look at Iran, we say, those Iranians must be looking to be regional hegemons and they're looking to exploit people and do this. Well, that's what we do. That's not what Iran does. Iran actually is a very humanistic country ruled by a leadership that's looking for the welfare of not just the Iranian people, but all people. They're not perfect. They make mistakes, and they're fully capable of doing some nefarious things, as all nation states are. But I think, by and large, the strategic vision of Iran is looking for regional stability, not regional instability. They're not looking for a war with Israel. They're looking for a way to contain Israel's irresponsible, strategic vision, but in a way that doesn't bring harm to people. I think the Iranians are tired of Lebanese dying. I think there might be one of the few nations in the world that actually gives a damn about the Lebanese people. I think the Iranians are tired of the Syrian people dying. I think they're tired of the Yemeni people starving to death. I think Iran actually cares about these people and is looking to pursue policies that bring about the general welfare of these people.
Scott, but what about Israel from their part? Because in their perspective, Iran is the seventh nation who's in their way of them fulfilling the greater Israel agenda, and is the seventh nation whose regime they haven't managed to take down directly or indirectly through the U.S. So aren't they looking for a war with Iran? They haven't finished with them yet.
Well, they got their war with Iran. They had their shot.
Yeah.
And they lost.
Get the result they wanted. So they're not.
And they're not going to get the results they wanted. Okay. That's the reality of it.
Clear.
It's an impossible dream. And the other thing too is, I think, it's hard for me to, because the Trump administration drives me crazy with the inconsistencies of their policies and the shallowness of their objectives and their goals. But I think the strategic vision of Donald Trump is a Middle East free of conflict. How he gets there is another question, especially given the fact that his administration is so closely controlled and dominated by Zionistic, pro-Zionistic elements. But Trump, I think, recognizes that one of the biggest problems in Israel today is Benjamin Netanyahu, the cult of personality that's accrued around him, and in the strength of his presence. He has a multi-decade-long history of dominating Israeli politics. That you're not going to get meaningful change out of Israel so long as Netanyahu is in a position to influence Israeli politics. So I think the Abrams Accords is a vehicle to misdirect or redirect Israel's energy away from military domination to economic stability, etc., knowing that this will unfold over time and knowing that Netanyahu's not going to live forever. At some point in time, Netanyahu is going to die. And when he dies, there will be a political vacuum that will be fought amongst the Israeli elites. And at that point in time, I don't believe this right-wing coalition that Netanyahu has cobbled together is going to survive politically. I think you're going to see Israel drift more towards a moderate center that is necessary for the Abrams Accords to be implemented fully. Saudi Arabia will never do business with a Netanyahu-led government. They will never become a full partner to the Abrams Accords as long as you have a right-wing, greater Israel-focused government. But if you get a more moderate center government that tones down this vicious rhetoric and these horrific crimes that Netanyahu is engaged in, you might see some direction. So I think the big goal of the United States right now is to put a pause on any major new conflicts. That is to rein Israel in from, engaging in a conflict with Iran that they can't win. And to create a window of opportunity for a post-Netanyahu government to come in and maybe change the way they interface with their Arab neighbors. It's hard because there are no rational voices here in the United States when it comes to Israel. The United States is 100% controlled by the pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist lobby, our media. It's very difficult to say the things that I'm saying right now. You get attacked, you get smeared, you get blocked, you get, singled out for attention. But at some point in time, reality will raise its head up, and it can't be ignored. We won't have Thomas Barak as the special envoy. Maybe we'll get somebody better, somebody who better understands the reality of the situation, who can put forward better ideas. But I think what Barak is doing in defense of Barak is he's trying to create the impression of stability, to create an opportunity for stability. It's not grounded in reality, but that seems to be reflective of the sort of the naive approach taken by the Trump administration. And we can call it naive because it doesn't solve any of the fundamental underlying problems. But strategically, if it keeps Israel and Iran from going to war against one another, I think that's the big picture, and that's the success they're looking for.
Scott, I wanted to close this off with something that doesn't have to do with the region, but with you personally. You had earlier told me that you were in Russia on a trip to Russia a couple of weeks ago. Do you mind telling us why?
Sure. I mean, I think anybody who knows anything about my background know that I'm an old Soviet hand. I cut my teeth in the intelligence business back during the Cold War, where I spent my time singularly focused on fighting the Soviet army, fighting the Soviet threat. And then in 1988, I was assigned to the Soviet Union as a weapons inspector, where I implemented the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. And this was a transformational period for me because it took me away from trying to kill Russians to actually working collaboratively with them towards, mutually acceptable goals of peace and stability. And by living in Russia, I got to meet the Russian people, and they stopped being this hypothetical caricature, and they became human beings. And you realize that they have families, they laugh, they cry, they have the same goals and aspirations. And I no longer wanted to kill these people. I wanted to be friends with them. They're pretty cool. And I've taken that approach ever since. I got involved in the weapons inspection business in Iraq, and that sort of diverted me away from, my primary Russian focus. But even as a weapons inspector in Iraq, I worked very closely with the Russian government, with Russian inspectors, with the Russian intelligence services, given Iraq's long history of relationship with the Soviet Union. So I maintained connectivity with Russia. In 2023, I was invited to go back to Russia. I translated my book, Disarming the Time of Perestroika, which is a memoir history of my time as a weapons inspector there. It was translated in the Russian language. And I went on a, 20 some odd day tour, went to 12 different cities doing, book events, talking with Russians, meeting with them. I realized that this was probably the most important job at this stage of my life. Is I was in a position where, at a time when no Americans were visiting Russia, no Americans were talking to Russia, I was in Russia. The Russians were like, I have to say, I flew from Istanbul into Novosibirsk, which is in Siberia. Oh. And when I landed in Novosibirsk, they were just like, why is an American landing here? What are you doing here? Why are you here? Well, given my past, that's a fair question. But they were very friendly, but they just couldn't understand it. Why are you here? And I said, to promote peace and better relations. They loved that mission. And I repeated my visit in December of 2023, January of 2024. Again, focusing on culture, learning more about the Russian soul, the Russian history, but also I went to Chechnya, I went to Crimea, I went to the new republics to see the truth about this conflict and what's going on. I was supposed to go back in June of 2024 for a 44-day trip that would take me all over Russia. 16 to 20 cities during this period of time, meeting with Russians, broadcasting these meetings back to the United States, to American audiences. But this is where the Biden administration said no. They seized my passport, prevented me from getting on the airplane, and then they accused me of being a Russian agent, and they sent 40 FBI agents into my house, seizing electronics and threatening to charge me with crimes that, if I was found guilty of these crimes, would put me in jail for 5 to 20 years. It's not a trivial thing that was happening. I fought back, and of course there was an election and priorities change. The FBI started returning the things they seized. I got my passport back. I got my passport back on July 15th of this year. That's my birthday. It was one of the coolest birthday gifts you could get. And I said, the first trip I'm going to make is to Russia. And I'm going to go back to Russia on the 1-year anniversary of the FBI raiding my house. Oh. So I will be in Russia on the 1 year to the day that the FBI said your work with Russia is a crime. Because it's not a crime. Trying to promote better relations between the United States and Russia is the greatest mission that I am in a position to accomplish, given my background, to promote nuclear disarmament, arms control. So I went back to Russia in August. I was supposed to have a number of high-level interviews, but then I landed in Russia the day that Donald Trump announced that he was going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska. And at that point, the Russian government said, we're not talking to anybody, with total radio silence. But they said, if you want to come back in November, things should have calmed down by then. So I planned a November trip, and I went 19 days. And again, I began doing a series of interviews, but the big interviews I wanted, suddenly they weren't answering the phone. And I was like, what's going on? Well, it turned out that in October 28th, the United States and Russia began this secret back channel negotiation about the 28 points of peace. And once again, the Russian government was like, we're just not talking to anybody right now. So it was bad timing, but still the results were outstanding, because on both trips, I have a podcast I do called The Russia House with Scott Ritter, and I interview prominent Russians, academicians, politicians, military officers, experts, leading members of Russian society, to capture the Russian reality and bring it to an American audience. And both in August and in November, I was able to carry out almost 50 separate interviews of these high-profile people. And this is very significant. I got to meet with Russians to have insightful conversations with them. And it's just a very exciting time, because even as difficult as things are, we're moving in the right direction. We're moving in a direction where the United States and Russia will stop viewing one another as enemies and start viewing each other as not just friends, but partners, economic partners. So it's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool. And it's what's been dominating. A lot of people have asked me, how come you haven't been talking about Palestine? How come you haven't been talking about, the Gaza and things like that? Well, I have been. I mean, in September, I wrote an article on my Substack that got a lot of attention called Silence. And I talked about the silence of the West, about the crimes that Israel's, and I speak about, just today, we had a long and detailed conversation of it. But, history sometimes, creates opportunities that have to be taken advantage of. And I am uniquely positioned to play a role in bettering U.S.-Russian relations right now. And so that's taken the majority of my time. It's not that I've forgotten about Gaza. It's just that I'm only one man. I don't have Hermione's little thing. If you watched Harry Potter,
Yes.
You can go back in time and, I wish I had that, because then I could be everywhere doing everything. But I'm only one man. I can only do one thing at a time. So Russia has been dominating my attention of late.
Scott, that's very commendable of you, your passion into this project, and you should definitely pursue it. And might I suggest that you keep going back to Russia, because it seems that whenever you go, rapprochement moves a step forward. You go.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I might be
yes, you're the.
That might be the secret weapon.
You are.
Maybe I'll plan to go back in March and they'll sign a peace treaty.
Exactly. So think about it, Scott. As always, Thank you so much for your time and your always invaluable insight. It's a pleasure always to host you. We love you.
Thanks. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
If you found value in this conversation, subscribe, tap the bell so you never miss an episode, and share it, especially if you're watching from the US, where the angles we explore here rarely make it into mainstream coverage simply because most hosts don't hail from this region. And as someone who does, my goal is always to ask the questions others miss, because nothing substitutes lived experience. Your support helps the only fully English-speaking woman-led platform broadcasting from the Eastern Mediterranean reach more people in the West who deserve the full picture.